Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, that's 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on your screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask for your name and number and the item that you wish to address, your phone number, and further instructions will be provided for you to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you when it is your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must state their full name and address for the record, and a maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair of the committee, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in staff report, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all discussions. Any person desiring notice of the decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Only applicants, specified persons, and public bodies may appeal decisions in respect of applications for minor variance and consents to the Ontario Land Tribunal. A notice of appeal may not be filed by any other individual, person, or unincorporated association or group. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant, agent, and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. We have one regret this evening, Mr. Ian Flemington. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interests? See none. I'll be taking deferrals or requests for withdrawals of applications at this time. If you're in the hearing, please raise your hand and the Secretary Treasurer will invite you to speak.
I've moved Catherine McEwen into the meeting.
Hello, Ms. McEwen.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. We'd like to request a deferral on item CAV 8001 3240 Cardi Mill Trail. We've had a chance to read the report and it's been brought to our attention that an additional variance is required. So we'd like to defer.
Very well. Members, all those in support of the request for deferral? Okay, your request has been granted. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you are ready for a new hearing date.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, I've moved Darlene Beaumont into the meeting.
Very well. Ms. Beaumont, you're muted. You need to turn your microphone on.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Good.
go ahead.
Sorry, Arlene Beaumont, Outfit and Associates, were the agents for the owners of 217 Chartwell Road. We'd like to request a deferral this evening. Like the previous speaker, we found that we do need an additional variance and we need an opportunity for our DESP application to catch up with our Committee of Adjustment application. There's some discrepancies between the two and we need to make sure that they jive before we come back to committee.
Very well. Thank you for the clarification. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready.
Thank you.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer,
I don't see any other requests for deferrals. I don't see hands raised for any deferrals at this time.
okay, very well. We'll start with our first application of the night, the consent application of B2213 at 1084 Argyle Drive. I have Nicholas Dell here as the agent.
Okay, I've moved Mr. Dell into the meeting.
Mr. Dell, if you can hear us, please turn your camera on and unmute yourself. We don't hear you. There's some echo. Perhaps there's a technical difficulty.
I'm just sending him a quick email.
Okay.
Apologies, committee. Can you hear me now? God. Excuse me. That should do it. I'm very sorry,
Yeah.
committee. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My apologies. I am in the middle of a renovation and I am on my mother-in-law's laptop. Please excuse the technical difficulties.
It's okay.
Nicholas Dell, for the record, I am the authorized agent for both the owners of 1084 and 1074 Argyle. It's an interesting, but what I would characterize as a minor housekeeping matter.
Sorry, I need the agent's name and full mailing address.
Nicholas Dell, for the record, authorized agent for both the owners in this case, mailing address 1370 Pure Ontario Street, Mississauga, L5H 3G4, G as in God.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So through you, Madam Chair, this is what I would characterize as a housekeeping technical boundary adjustment that's in keeping with an existing condition on site. By way of presentation to you, to orient yourself with the history of the site, Frank Clegg, one of the owners authorizing me in this case, who is the current owner of 1074 Argyle Drive, used to own 1084 Argyle Drive and subsequently allowed his mother-in-law to live there. Mother-in-law has now passed away, God rest her soul, and the property has been sold to the Serrano family, who has also authorized me to appear before them. The Serranos now own 1084, and during the previous zoning bylaw under the town of Oakville in 2008, my client transferred this bump out, as I will characterize it, a 0.0026 hectare size jog or bump out to himself as the owner of 1084, and that caused an inadvertent merger on title. And so when he sold the property recently to the Serrano family, that bump out went with it. And so we're here simply today to transfer the bump out back to 1074. And the resulting variances that are associated with the consent this evening are triggered as a result of the comprehensive zoning bylaw in 2014. That's zoning bylaw 2014-014. In 2008, there were subsequent interior yard setback variances that were approved as a result of this transfer. However, the bylaw has changed since then, and we need to recognize today's bylaw, which is why there are additional interior yard setback deficiencies that are being requested. I understand we have positive staff comments, and I've read and have the conditions in front of me, despite joining you on my phone this evening. And I have permission from both owners who've authorized me as their agent this evening to accept the draft conditions. And I understand that staff have no objections from the various agencies and departments that have been circulated. Subject to any questions you have, committee, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think that should be the conclusion of my presentation this evening.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Are there any questions of the applicant agent at this time? Okay, I see none. Madam Secretary, has anyone called in for this application?
I do not see anyone at this time.
Okay, very well. Then we will take the matter into committee. Who would like to start off with the consent, and then we will move each variance accordingly thereafter. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm satisfied that this consent represents a minor technical housekeeping matter. It complies with the requirements of the Planning Act that upon a subdivision is not required. I would move approval of the consent subject to the conditions in Appendix A. I
Very
would.
well. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
I'm fine.
Okay, so subject to the conditions of Appendix A, we are moving that the consent application be approved. All those in support? Okay, the consent application has been thus moved and approved. Now we will move the variances that are attached to each property. First being CAV 190 of 2022 for 1084 Argyle Drive.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will move that the application CAVA 90 2022 be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the tests of the Planning Act. I would note that there is no opposition from the community to this application. I would make that approval subject to that consent B 2213-1710 be approved and the certificate of official is issued, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if the certificate of official has not been issued.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. All those in support of this application? Okay. The application has been approved. We will then move to CAV 191 of 2022 at 1074 Argyle Drive with
Chair,
the same variance.
Similarly, move that application CAVA 191 2022 be approved, finding that it meets the test of the Planning Act, have no impact. I would again note that there's no opposition from the community and would make that approval subject to the same conditions. That consent B 2213-1710 be approved and certificate of official be issued, and that the approval expires within 2 years if the certificate of official has not been issued.
Very well. The discussion on this recommendation. I see none. All those in support. Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Very well. Thank you, Mr. Dell. All three applications have been approved.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and staff. Appreciate you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
if I can
Yes.
just ask you to just go over the 2 applications that were deferred, so if there's people waiting as attendees, that they realize that the application will not be heard this evening.
Yes, absolutely. So the 2 applications that requested a deferral to go back and reassess are CAV A001 of 2023 at 3240 Carding Mill Trail. Again, it's CAV 001 of 2023 at 3240 Carding Mill Trail. And CAV 006 of 2023 at 217 Chartwell Road. Again, that's CAV 006 of 2023 at 217 Chartwell Road. And pending the deferral, the applicant will have to submit a new application, and everyone who was informed of this meeting today will once again be circulated according to the bylaws of the Committee of Adjustments, and will receive another notice when the application has been submitted and has been put on our agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we are moving on to application CAV 004 of, no. Hold on. I just said them. Yeah, that's 001 and 003. 001 and 006. We just finished.
Okay, we're on 003.
Okay, we are 003, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I marked 003 deferred instead of 006. My apologies. Okay, so we are at CAV 003 of 2023 at 293 Savoy Crescent. Again, that's CAV 003 of 2023 at 293 Savoy Crescent. If you'd like to speak to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Staff will be there to take your call and provide you with further instructions at that time. We do have one email of opposition from a Mr. Don Vrooman and Wendy Solway, and the agent for this application is Mr. Joris Kieran. Is Mr. Kieran here?
If he could please raise his hand. Okay, Mr. Kieran's in the meeting now.
Apologies for that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Kieran, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I could see the committee, but I wasn't able to get myself on. Good
Yeah.
evening, members of the committee, Madam Chairperson. My name is Joris Kieran. I am the agent for the applicants. My address is 11 Bronte Road, Unit 31. And I am going to present a brief slide presentation to go over the variances that we're seeking tonight. And through that presentation, I'm also going to address some of the concerns that were raised recently by the neighbor and also the same person who submitted a letter of objection. So I'll kind of cover both through this presentation. We'll start with slide 1, and it's the first issue that was raised was regarding the space that's existing between dwellings on the street as an average, and suggesting that it's going to be less than that in this particular case. I've highlighted with a red circle or a red oval there the distance measured from the closest point of the two dwellings. It's about 14 foot 10, call it 15 feet. That's a pretty reasonable separation for the two buildings. We are at about 5 feet from the property line. So again, that's more than the minimum. The minimum is 4 feet. And as you can see that as you go further back, there's actually a widening that occurs. So you're closer to 18, 19 feet as you're approaching the rear of the building. I don't have a dimension on that. The other comment was just insufficient space and in the side yard for maintenance. This is more something that my client, the owner of this property, is to be concerned with. But again, we're providing as a minimum about 5 feet. And because the lot line, the building is staggered, there's actually quite a bit of space there. The owner of 289 Savoy in their letter mentioned a concern that's based on a development that occurred on the other side of them 7 or 8 years ago, where this new dwelling was constructed, and it appears to be right on the 4 foot limit. So it's 4 feet away from the side yard property. And when they excavated that, there was some damage as well to their property. And when the house was built and after the fence was put in, there was very little space left. And that was a comment. So I'm just trying to demonstrate that this is not the same situation. We have a little bit more space, and because of the angled lot line and the staggered nature of the building, there's actually quite a bit more room in this proposal. If you go to the slide 2, please. So there's a comment also about just the massing and the height of the building, and you know, one of the terms was you know, sheer blank walls, etc. And although this is obviously a 2-story side facade, and certainly more substantial than the existing bungalow that's there now, there is some breakup the massing that's occurring, and that's really what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So it's really just, it's 3 different wall planes. I've divided up into 3 there. Wall 1, we have a setback of 5.5 feet from the property line. That's on average, that's about in the middle of that wall plane. The one in the middle, wall plane 2, it's about 8 feet back from the property line. So, you know, a fairly healthy setback. And then wall plane 3 is, it's about 5 feet back. So again, just to demonstrate that there is actually some variation in that wall, and there's different planes occurring. So it's not just a, you know, a straight wall. Staying on slide 2, just to talk about the height, there's a point about sunlight and shadowing, etc. And as the committee members are aware, you know, there's not really a right to that. This building is not exceeding the height limit. It's under 9 meters. It's not closer to the property line than it is allowed to be. So my client is fully within their right to build exactly to this height. If the variances that are being requested this evening were to be denied or removed from the application, this side facade and the height would stay exactly the same. So I don't think these variances being sought tonight are aggravating the concerns of this neighbor. They come more with the building that's allowed to be built as of right. If we can go to slide number 3, please. So just to briefly touch on the concern mentioned by the neighbor about the damage to their property that occurred on the other side when that house was being built. So it was basically an excavation issue where they excavated right to the property line, and then, you know, it's not uncommon for it to collapse in and cause all kinds of damage to you know, the adjoining property. What I wanted to point out is that the building department and the permit issuance process has changed since then, and we are now applicants are now required to install shoring in those kind of cases. So I just threw up a couple of generic images of what that would look like. So this is the shoring that would be required to some extent on that side lot line in order to prevent exactly that. So just to address that, it will be different, not only because the building's further away from the property line, but also this shoring will be to some extent employed to protect their property. We'll go to slide 4, please. Now I just want to get into more of the general presentation where I just want to highlight 2 variances that were approved on the street in the past. I think there might have been more, but these are the 2 that I could find. This is at 241 Savoy. We had, not we, but the committee approved 27.3% for lot coverage. We're only seeking 26%, so just as a comparable. We'll go to slide 5, please. So this is a house that my office did. It's actually right across the street from the subject property that we're talking about today. We have approval for 27.4% and also a garage area increase as well, which is exactly what we're asking for. So just to demonstrate that there is similar approvals on the street. Just in general, my sense is that about half the street has been redeveloped in the last 10 years with replaced dwellings of various sizes, but not the original bungalows. So the street's fairly well developed. Slide 6, please. So this is the just talking about the variances now. And what we usually do is just to highlight where they're, you know, occurring in the building. So variance 1 is just the small garage area increase. That's the hatched area in the garage. So that's just for additional storage. As you can see, it's occurring on the side of the building that's not joining the 289 Savoy side. So it doesn't really affect what they see. And so that covers variance 1, and then variance 2 is the lot coverage variance. So we have a small overage. All of it can be attributed to that small hatched area that's on the rear covered porch, which it's a 1-story open structure, so it doesn't really contribute that much to massing. And again, if we just uncovered that part of the roof, then it would be you know, complying. So it's not really a big change from what it would look like if we were to, you know, not have it. And then just the last slide, 7, which isn't really a direct, you know, relation to the variances, but just to demonstrate that this is the front of the house. The variances being sought are really occurring on the rear and the side of the building, so they don't really impact what's visible from the street. That concludes my presentations. My presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You're muted.
Yes, I just realized that. Are there any questions of Mr. Kieran at this time? Okay, I see none. Is there anyone who's interested in speaking to this application?
Yes,
That has called in?
Yes, I'll be moving them into the meeting.
Very well.
I've moved Mr. Vroman and Mr. Where did it go? Oh, there we go, Mr. Rasik.
Okay, we have, okay, 2.
I believe one is the homeowner.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Roman.
Thank you very much. We were expecting a property of this size. 10 of these houses on the streets have been redeveloped. We've been on the street for 40 years, but in the last 10 or 12 years, there have been 10 new homes built out of 24. We appreciate, I mean, it's a lovely design. I have to compliment Mr. Kieran on his designs. There are a couple more in the neighborhood, and not just on our street, but all over the neighborhood, in fact. I'm feeling a bit outgunned, though, Mr. Kieran being an architect with so much experience, and the Rasiks being developers themselves and realtors. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong about your being a developer, Mr. Rasik, I apologize. But your last house is also quite good looking and also of similar size and massing. The only concern I have is that this house could have been built driveway to driveway. I did send out a package taken rather hastily. We're in BC visiting my daughter, and for the month of January, I'm working on my father's estate, so I haven't really had an opportunity to do much more than this sort of hasty objection, and my apologies for that. But on the street, even the larger houses are either significantly more space between the structures, or are built garage to garage, or big side to big side, for lack of a better term. If the Rasiks reversed this and put the driveway next to ours, the larger size of their house would be 60 feet from their neighbors on the other side, rather than, you know, a dozen feet from our place. I mean, right now, all the neighbors have relied on the large setbacks in our property to provide them with a reasonable setback on their property, so they could be within 4 or 5 feet of the property line. So, I mean, my goal here is to either have them increase the setback, because, I mean, what it does is it restricts us and what we can do, and it's certainly not any good for the aesthetics of our place. I appreciate that it makes their house look very nice. But my real concern is that it will shade our deck, it will shade our side yard. If they reversed it with their garage to our side, it would be similar to similar. I mean, I'd have no objections to this, but I mean, and I have no feet to stand on anyway. I mean, what they're requesting is quite reasonable, at least reasonable from a from a zoning perspective, from a neighbor's perspective, it's terrible. And I don't know what else to say. Did the members receive the PDF file that I sent out showing the houses in the neighborhood? You did? Okay, well, that's good. I don't know what else to say.
It's tough. We understand the pain in redevelopment of a neighborhood, but I can, from what we see in front of us, all the setbacks have been respected, because the variances before us have nothing to do with the actual home setbacks. According to the bylaw, they've met them all. But in any event, we appreciate your submission. We'll have Mr. Kieran address your concerns.
No, it's okay. I mean, Mr. Kieran has already addressed the concerns expressed, and I mean, I'm, pardon me, Madam Chair, I apologize for butting in. But I mean, my goal would be to have the orientation of the house reversed, because then it would fit in better with the neighborhood. But that has nothing to do with the zoning. The zoning doesn't have anything to do with that. So I mean, it's really up to the applicants and the architect to make the change. And if they have no intention to do so, then I don't need to hear their reasons. It just means that they're doing what they want to do, and it's going to affect us, and we have to live with it.
I certainly appreciate where you're coming from. I don't know, do my colleagues have any questions of Mr. Vrooman before we hear the RESICs, if they have anything to add? Okay. I wasn't aware that you'd like to speak, but go ahead, because Mr. Kieran was representing you. Do you have anything that you'd like to say, since you've requested to do so?
Oh, yeah. Hi, like, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Yeah, I'm sorry if you didn't know. I did register for the link to speak. So I apologize.
Sorry, I do need
surprise.
their name and address for the record.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, so my name is Stefan Rosick and my wife is Sylvia Rosick. Our mailing address is 339 Morden Road in Oakville. And we are the owners of the subject property.
Very well. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason I asked to speak was just in response to the objection that we received from our neighbor, and also to give a little bit of understanding of why we're asking for the variance. I totally understand the importance of hearing anybody that has some concerns. However, in reading the letter which was received, it just seems that more of the objections are not really related to our variance as stated, but more as opposition to a large house and the driveways. As noted in the letter, and I'm sorry I'm reading it like this, but it was written in the letter, so I do have to read it, that they would like to, it's opposition of the residents, and if the only way that they can do so is to ask the committee to have rejection on basis of the lot coverage, then so be it. And it being the second time that a developer has come in with a larger home that has eclipsed theirs. So I just have 3 comments on that. Number one, I just want to make it very clear that I'm not a building developer. And as important as it is to hear some concerns, we're also residences with a right to build a home that we find aesthetically pleasing, as long as it meets all of the bylaws. I have lived in Ward 2 since for 2014. My family's been in Oakville for 20 years. My kids go to school here. I've volunteered at Oakville soccer. In short, Oakville's our home. And our story is that when we got married, yes, we lived in a larger home in planning for a larger family, but we only had 1 kid. So we sold that and we moved to a smaller home. Immediately when that happened, we got pregnant and had twins. And I call that an expensive happy accident. And this is the reason that we are building our home. And my wife, in no uncertain terms, has warned me that any talk of moving after this, I'll be doing so alone. And I want to point out that our neighbors know this. I have introduced myself. His wife, Wendy, has met our kids. I mentioned actually with the driveway. And when the variance started, I sent out another letter with our contact information saying if you wanted to speak about it, and nothing was reached out. So I'm very surprised about the objection, and to be honest, I guess a little saddened because you always, I do hope all of this works out. Second, just in regards to the variance of themselves, the layout of the house, as you see, was initially planned without any need of variance. We only opted to do so because it made functional sense. Our home is under the allowed square footage, and that storage was initially included in the square footage of the home. We opted for a variance because it's more functional to have it open to the garage than the house. If we don't use a variance, the footprint, it doesn't change, it just reincorporates in the home square footage. Except now you have two people that are unhappy in a less functional house, as my kids will have to open a door to get their bikes in and out of the garage. The back porch, as stated, we're only asking for 4 feet that would fully cover the whole back porch, and we feel that that's reasonable because even without the variance, we would want a portion of the porch covered because it's the exit from it. So we didn't feel that 4 feet was anything extra and would really only cause shade on us. And as stated by the staff who had looked at our application, it falls within the intent of the bylaws and has no effect on the neighboring properties. And finally, again, I just have to state this because it was noted in the objection letter that our neighbors stated that they themselves built a 2-story home many years ago, smaller than ours, yes, but it's still a 2-story home that eclipses the more modest bungalows which are there. And they reached out to their neighbors, which is respectful, as we did. We met them and we gave our contact information. And any 2-story home is going to eclipse that. And I'm sure that there's some people that lived on the street who might not have liked a 2-story home, but it was within their right to actually do that. And that's all we're asking for. We're not asking for any special setbacks or extra height or doing anything that would be harmful to our neighbors. So, you know, in short, I want to have a happy, you know, have neighbors which are happy with our home, who appreciate it. And I'm more than happy to sit down with them in the future over a barbecue like neighbors should and talk about things such as landscaping, which will have more effect on shading to their home than what you're seeing. But that doesn't, I feel that falls outside of what we're asking for on this hearing. So I would just ask a committee to put more weight on the staff's review and the comments from our architect. And I'll go a little over because I didn't know what our neighbor was talking about is the driveway. And I'll just comment on that, you know, we have a right to make the home as aesthetically pleasing as we feel, and people have different opinions. For us, we feel it looks nicer to have a driveway, lawn, driveway, lawn, driveway, lawn versus lawn, driveway, driveway. We have that right now, and there's issues when you're blowing it's the driveway. It was done in no way as an inconvenience. It just, people have different opinions on what's aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Rassick. Mr. Kieran, I suppose Mr. Rassick summed it up. Did you have anything else to add? Mr. Ruman, I see your hand up. Did you have anything else to add? We usually don't go back and forth. You've had your 5 minutes and then someone else has their 5 minutes and then the committee takes it into account. So I don't know.
All I'd like to say is that we have no objection. It's a beautiful looking home. It's a lovely design. I mean, everything is reasonable about it, except that because they reversed its orientation, it has a significant effect on the aesthetics of our property. Nothing in the landscaping is going to improve. I mean, I can't fill the side yard with river stone. It's silly. So I mean, that's fine. I mean, the committee of adjustment will consider anything that the applicants have said as reasonable. All I can do is ask Mr. Rassick if he would consider reversing the design and leave it
Yes,
at
because
that.
we can't, we have
Yeah, no, I
actually
know, I understand. It's
no way of forcing them to change
no,
that.
there is no way,
Yeah.
and I understand everything that they want. This is going to be their permanent home. I mean, we lived where we are for 40 years, and 26 years in the building that we have. We have the same relief on their side because of the driveways that they could have provided, but there's, I mean, I have
Thank
nothing.
you. I'd like to get to the other members of the committee who have questions, so I
That's
appreciate it.
fine.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Mr. Hardcastle, did you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a question of the homeowner, and you know, it came out of my reading of the letter that Mr. Vorman provided, and the way I was reading the letter that was provided was about a sun shadow impact and his ability to carry on activities within his yard. I certainly have some reservations and concerns about the connection of that impact to the variances that are being specifically requested, as the chair has aptly pointed out. But I heard Mr. Rassick speak to an aesthetic implication to this, and speaking of this in terms of the driveway, I'd really like to hear Mr. Rassick speak to the functional impact and his willingness to consider something that would help to accommodate Mr. Vorman.
Yeah, so it was something specifically that we asked for. Our last two homes had driveway, and it was always an issue when snow comes. When you're blowing the snow, it goes on the other person's driveway. And when I see homes, to me, it's just spaced out more. You have a driveway and then a lawn, and then a driveway and a lawn, and a driveway and a lawn. To me, I mean, it's a personal. Who's to say what's like aesthetically nice for one person and another? I can appreciate that maybe not everybody thinks that way, but
Especially because the other side of the corner.
yeah, and the other side is a corner as well. So I mean, it's just a personal preference. And when we started this process, I mentioned to our architect that I didn't want to go any setbacks. I didn't want to encroach any closer than was necessary. I didn't want to go higher than anything which was necessary. We plan on being there a long time, and I want to be friends with our neighbors, but it's just when you design a home, people have different opinions on what's aesthetically nice.
Very well. Any other further questions? Sorry, further questions? Mr. Hardcastle, we didn't hear you.
I'll just make a statement here. I don't believe that was really a response to the actual question that was before Mr. Rassick. You know, again, speaking to aesthetics and personal preference here, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, at this point in time. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Telesky, did you have anything? Any questions? Okay. Very well. I'll hand it over to Mr. Kieran. You've heard the comments. I'll give you a couple of minutes because we've already extended our time for this application more than the usual. So you can address whatever you feel was left unaddressed, and then we'll take the matter into committee.
I don't think there's too much more to add beyond my my presentation. I think we've addressed the concerns mentioned in the letter. The only thing I'll say about the driveway is that I do think it's a personal preference, and just from other projects we've done, when we have these type of properties where it's a corner lot abutting on the one side, we typically recommend, it is a personal preference, but we would also typically recommend that the driveway be separated, because then it creates a lot of space between the driveways, and that's usually desirable, at least from what we tend to recommend and what we've seen other people preferring. I do appreciate that it might create a less ideal situation from a massing perspective facing the neighbor's property, but you know, I think that over time, that will be not as bad as perhaps assumed at the moment. You know, we'd have to do a study to analyze that, but you know, from what I see the site, you know, dimensions being and where the buildings are, you know, I think there's still going to be plenty of sun that's going to go into the backyard. A little less than now for sure, but not you know, an immense amount of shadowing that I'm foreseeing there.
Very well. Thank you. If there isn't anything further from the committee members, we'll take the matter into committee and we'll open the floor for discussion. Who would like to make a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start off by saying that you know, as usual, Mr. Kieran does a very good job in addressing the massing and the impacts of larger buildings. This is an aesthetically pleasing building that undertakes a lot of measures in order to address the size. And you know, I'm satisfied with respect to the impact of the variances being sought being addressed satisfactorily through the responses provided by Mr. Kieran and through the actual architectural design of the building. You know, I am a little bit disappointed that the property owners are not prepared to sort of consider the impacts of the location of the massing of the property in terms of shadow and overlook with respect to the adjacent property, given the opportunities with the adjacent corner lot. But again, as was aptly pointed out by the chair, they're not, those concerns and issues are not directly related to the variances at hand, and as such to the decision of this committee. So on that basis, I'll put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variances do conform to the 4 tests of the Act. And the motion should be subject to 2 conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated November 15th, 2022, and all elevation drawings dated November 15th, 2022, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, members of the
Thank
committee.
you. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Application CV 004. At 2481, 2485, and seems to be a mistake here.
It's, yeah, CAV 004.
Yeah, is it 2481 and 2485? Because I have 3.
Yeah, and 2481.
2481 is twice?
Oh, sorry, yes. It is actually.
It's just 2481 and 2485, correct?
And 2489.
89, okay.
Yep.
All right, so it's CAV 004 of 2023 at 2481, 2485, and 2489 Taunton Road. And I have the agent as Nicole Rinoli. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I hope that the S is silent. I will be.
You can ask anybody to raise their hand if they'd like to be moved into the meeting.
Yep. Who is here representing CAV 004 2023 at 2481, 2485, and 2489 Taunton Road.
Okay, I've moved them into the meeting.
Okay. Oh, parking spaces. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Nicole Scrignoli.
Say it again.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Nicole Scrignoli.
Scrignoli. Okay. Welcome.
My address is 555 Wilson Avenue, Unit 301E.
Very well. Your presentation is on the board.
The application before you today is for 6 parking spaces within an underground parking structure of the 2481, 2485, 2489 Trafalgar Heights Oak and Co condos. So through the registration process, there were 6 parking spaces identified that do not meet the zoning bylaw due to some encroachments like columns, pipes, fans. These parking spaces do function as normal parking spaces. Just through the zoning bylaw review, a variance is required. So the one parking space you have on the screen here is the unit number 4. You can go to the next page, please. Unit 51. So in this instance, there's a pipe with the circle and the cross through it that encroaches. Next page, please. So unit 90, the columns are what encroach here. Next, please. Again, there's a pipe in this one. Next. 123 are the columns, and one more, please. The columns again. And the next one, please. So these are just some photos of the parking spaces. So as you can see, a car will fit, and if you're comparing them to the parking space beside it, the width is essentially the same. It's just the pipe at the front of the parking space adjacent to the wall. All the purchasers who will buy none of these parking spaces have been sold yet, and the purchasers who will get the parking spaces will be notified that they don't meet the zoning bylaw and that this variance, should it be approved, has been obtained for the parking space. Next picture, please. So there are 750 units in the total development within the phase 2, which was registered just last year. There's 508 units, and we do meet the zoning bylaw requirement for total parking spaces, and these are additional and above and beyond what is required per the zoning bylaw. You can see the 3 highlighted on this page. Next page, please. There's 2 on this level. Next, please. 1 on this level. Next, please. And this was my letter with the described proposed variances. This variance, we believe, does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And the last page is, I believe, my signature. Yeah. And that concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions, Madam Chair, you may have, or any of the committee members.
Very well. No, I appreciate that you mentioned the disclosure, because that was going to be my question to you, that they will be disclosed in the deed of sale. Members, are there any questions on Ms. Cronoli at this time? I don't see any. Has there anyone called for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There's no one at this time.
Okay, very well. We'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess 6 out of 508 isn't bad. Madam Chair, I'm satisfied that these parking spaces, while encumbered with some constraints, still function as usable parking spaces. And I would also note that there's been no objection. So, Madam Chair, I find that these variances do meet tests of the Planning Act. And I would make that approval subject to 4 conditions as respected, requested by staff at Unit 4, 51, 60, 90, 123, and 128. Parking spaces be permitted in general accordance with the plans dated December 9th, 2022. The owner agrees to place a notification in all offers of purchase and sale or equivalent, advising prospective purchasers that Unit 4, 51, 60, 90, 123, and 128 are deficient in size and may not be suitable for certain vehicles, that the owner provide confirmation that the condominium declaration has been updated to specifically identify all substandard parking spaces to the satisfaction of the town, and that the approval expires in 2 years if building permit hasn't been issued. And in the case where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of the work has been fully completed.
Very well. Thank you. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Have a good night.
Members of the committee, have a good night.
Application CV 007 of 2023 at 37 Pebble Ridge Place. Again, it's CAV 007 of 2023 at 37 Pebble Ridge Place. If there's anyone who's interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095 and staff will be taking your calls and providing you with further instructions to join the video conference. We have 2 letters of opposition on record from Ms. Jasmine Glavan and Edward Glavan. And I have Ian Robertson and Michael Grish.
Yeah, I'm just trying to move them into the meeting.
Very well. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson should be in the meeting now.
Oh, good afternoon. Can you guys hear and see me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. My name is Ian Robertson, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of the owners for 37 Pebble Ridge Place. My address is 20 Rivermead Road in Concord, Ontario. So we have an application before you for 4 minor variances, and I'm going to speak briefly to them and then happy to answer any questions you will have. So 4 variances we're looking for is a increase in our garage area. We are looking for a increase in our RFA. We're looking for an increase in our lot coverage, and we are looking for an increase in our maximum building or in our building height. We believe that these all meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and I'm going to speak to them, those tests right now. So we believe that the application before you meets the general intent of the official plan. Per Schedule A of the official amendment of 289, this is a urban residential area, and our proposed plan is a single detached 2-story dwelling that falls just slightly outside of a few of the parameters of the zoning bylaw. As far as the general intent of the bylaw goes, again, our bylaw is 2014-0-14, more specifically RL 1-0. And this again speaks to the single detached dwelling for which we are proposing, and we meet the majority of the criteria within that bylaw, but for these 4 minor exceptions. As far as whether this property is desirable for the lands, I would suggest that it is desirable for this area. The variances that we're looking for, we believe to be minor, and I'll get into more specifics of them further on. But we believe this is desirable in this area because being familiar with the area, having been involved in other developments and whatnot, this committee has approved variances in very similar fashion above and below Lakeshore Boulevard, and we believe that we fall within the same scope as many of those properties do. And as far as the variances themselves being considered to be being minor in nature, we're looking for 4 of them, 3 of them for which there are a few objections for. 1, 2, and 3 there are objections for, and then the 4th one there is not. The 4th one is the building height, and there was no objections. The other 3, which were the garage increase from 56 square meters to 74.23. The residential floor area was an increase from 29% to 31.91%, and the coverage going from 25% to 27.93. Having read the town's comments on those were pertaining to the consideration of drainage on the property. And so we believe that these variances are minor in the fact that, for example, our coverage number at our coverage number, which I think is the biggest point of contention, I think, we're asking for a 2.93% increase on that coverage number, which is basically the equivalent of our cabana. So the house itself, as you can see, is 25.33 per my diagram there, and the cabana is 2.6% of our total lot coverage. And so the house itself is more or less compliant. And then with that house being compliant, the garage increase and the GFA or the RFA increase both fit within the envelopes of that 25.33% coverage. So that's why we believe that they're minor in nature. So further to that, I have fully read the comments from engineering department, and I have also read the letters of opposition from the neighbors on Shorewood Place. And of course, my client, who is going to be a neighbor to these individuals, obviously respects their opinions and thoughts. And of course, we want to comment or address their comments to the best of our ability. So what I wanted to say quickly, I guess, because I'm probably running out of time here, in order to address the concerns of drainage, we are only asking for one variance that could potentially affect drainage, and that's the actual coverage. It's the lot footprint. It's the lot footprint. And noting that the lot footprint of the house itself is only 25.33, and the cabana itself as an accessory structure is 2.6%. The house itself isn't really exceeding what the bylaw is permitted. So what I'm talking about was, sorry, give me 1 second. So I want to focus on the coverage anyways. The coverage we're seeking is for an increase of 2.93% for homes that exceed 7 meters in building height. If I compare the bylaw for homes under 7 meters in building height, we'd be allowed 30% coverage, or 2.7% more than what we're proposing. Now, it suggests that our building height would have limited to no impact on the drainage, and therefore our proposed coverage would have little to no effect on the lot design drainage, since the lot was already designed to sustain a 7-meter high building with 30% coverage. And I say this because the drainage itself is obviously the larger concern, as was indicated by several departments as well as neighbors. And I think that's important to understand, that the property itself was actually designed to allow for 30% should the building be shorter. I'd also like to point out, just to put things into perspective of relative hardscape and drainage, if we look at our driveway proposal, we are proposing a circular driveway, which does not require a variance, but it equates to nearly 10% of our lot area, and that would more drastically affect our drainage than, say, the cabana at 2.6%, which is what's basically putting us over our allowable coverage. So I'll end with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee or neighbors may have.
Mr. Robertson, you talked a lot about your coverage, but you failed to tell us where 550 square feet of extra floor area is needed in your home in terms of residential floor area, and why the need for an excessively large garage. We typically see some increases in garage area to accommodate for tandem parking or a small storage, but definitely not that much more over the 56.
Right. So the garage area, obviously, yes, you're correct in the assumption that there's a tandem garage in that space. And we haven't delineated storage, but rather than having exterior storage sheds for patio furniture and other exterior accessories, lawnmowers, etc., my client wanted to ensure that there's ample space in the garage to store things come wintertime, hockey nets and all that stuff. So that was the reason for the extended garage. And with the belief that the 25% coverage for the house, or 25.33% for the house, garage and porches was all more or less within the bylaw, the impact of the garage, whether it was inside the house as RFA or whether it was outside as garage space, wouldn't be a noticeable difference within the building envelope. As you probably have seen the elevations, you'll notice that the house has a lot of articulation to it. On all sides, we are minimized on almost all four sides. We have shorter, smaller elements that break up the size of the house and the roof. Above the garage, it's looking like a 1.5 story. The front office space is a 1.5 story. The family room is a 1.5 story. And all this was done with intention to create a lesser impact on the property itself. And then to address your comment regarding the extra 500 square feet, my client wished to have a master bedroom on the ground floor. He preferred not to have what was considered to be a top-heavy house. A lot of designs today, when we build over top of the garage, you get an extra 20% of house over top on the second floor, but you actually live on the ground floor. So our concentration was to make the ground floor larger and accommodate his master bedroom down there. And that way, that's why we don't build over several areas of that house, allowing us for high ceilings, vaulted ceilings, and lower roof lines.
Okay, did you submit your elevations with your presentation? Because you do have opposition from your neighbors and they don't get those elevations on with their notices. So it's for their benefit, you should be able to put them up.
Okay.
And show what the rendering looks like. Yeah.
Sure. I thought they were circulated on them. My apologies. Otherwise, I would have.
They are to us, but for privacy reasons, we don't share the drawings of the homes to the public.
The elevations are available to the public. It's the floor plans that are not available.
Floor plans. I apologize. Yes.
I believe the neighbors' concerns were for drainage, softscape, and the trees behind our property. I think those were their biggest concerns in the letters that I had read. Sorry, and the tree issues that they were discussing. I suppose the developer didn't do a good job of taking care of them if they're suffering. But it's my understanding that there's supposed to be a protection fence around them for development and construction that we've adhered to within our design and grading design.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions. Are there any other questions from the members to Mr. Robertson? Okay, I see none. Okay, we'll take the neighbors' comments. If there's anyone who's in attendance would like to speak to this matter, please raise your hand and you'll be invited to speak. And we do have the 2 letters on record.
There's no one at this time.
Okay, very well. Did you have a a discussion with the neighbors that had sent in the letter of opposition?
I did not. I only received them today.
Okay.
And to be honest, I was scrambling a little bit to sort of relook at what they were considering. I did, however, I just wanted to mention this too briefly, is I actually did reach out to the civil engineer who designed the subdivision. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the process, but they designed the subdivision. It's our office would do a grading plan for each lot, and then that engineer would certify that grading plan. We have currently completed one, sent it into them for discussions, and brought the attention of a slightly larger footprint to their attention. And they didn't, they couldn't comment on it at this point, but they said they could provide a report in the future should our footprint actually require some sort of design requirements for the drainage change. But that's actually sort of where I came with the 30% that you're allowed to have at a 7-meter tall building or less basically indicates that the lot itself is designed to accommodate a larger footprint in itself. So that's sort of where that came from. Just as there's a discussion with Schaefer's, the engineering firm.
Okay. Any other questions before we take the matter into committee? Okay, I see none. Who'd like to make a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including a comprehensive staff report, and having heard the comments from the agent for the owner, my thoughts on the requested variances are siding in with the position that was articulated by staff in the staff report. Coverage, runoff, and infiltration, stormwater management is a stated concern. There were also significant concerns raised with respect to the building massing related around the additional GFA and the inclusion of the additional garage area, and staff was able to tie a lot of those pieces as well as the landscape components together in terms of responding to variances 1, 2, and 3. On this basis, I am going to put forward a motion for refusal, finding that the requested variances do not conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I would note that there was a letter of opposition provided by a neighbor, and those concerns continue to be outstanding in my mind. So that's my motion, Madam Chair.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just wanted to add to Mr. Hardcastle's reasoning. I just find this represents this attempt to significantly overbuild on this lot. A request for increased garage, which adds to coverage, a significant increase to the allowable square footage, which adds to both coverage and massing, and an attempt to maximize covered outdoor spaces, which combined, just in my mind, represents an overbuilding that's not desirable or consistent with the bylaw, and it's in a brand new subdivision. And I would also note that development engineering are of the opinion that if this were approved, they could not get a site plan approved, which would comply with the overall grading required in the subdivision. So I'm going to support Mr. Hardcastle in this regard.
Very well. The motion is to deny the application. All those in support? Okay, the application has been denied, none opposed. Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Have a good evening.
Thank you, you as well.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is CAV 008 of 2023 at 85 Pebble Ridge Place. Again, it's CAV 008 of 2023 at 85 Pebble Ridge Place.
Can you ask if there's anybody to raise their hand if they'd like to be moved into the meeting?
Yes, who's the agent here to represent the 85 Pebble Ridge Place? Please raise your hand so you can be invited.
Yeah, I
to
believe
the panel.
I've moved the homeowner into the meeting.
The homeowner? Miss Coco?
That is correct. Sorry about that. Let me put my camera on. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members.
Good
For the
evening.
record, my name is Dama Coco. I am the owner applicant of 85 Pebble Ridge Place in Oakville. I am here requesting a minor variance to permit the construction of a two-story detached
Sorry,
dwelling.
I need your address, please, for the record.
Oh, for the record, my address is 3134 Post Road in Oakville.
Thank you.
The subject dwelling we're talking about here is, again, on slide 2, subject land south of Lakeshore, west of Dorval. The plan number is depicted on this slide. If you don't mind moving to slide 3. So the reason for the variance is to meet the architectural control requirements as governed by the town appointed control architect, Majestic Estates. They require that additional stone skirting but be put along the entire perimeter of the proposed building. And as a result of that, that resulted in us increase or exceeding the maximum allowed RFA. So if you move to slide 4. You can see the green section depicts where we had the skirting ending initially, and they require that we introduce the red area from a skirting perspective, which we had to put in, which, as I said, increased the RFA. If you don't mind moving to slide 5. As a result of that, we added a little bit of a study room for one of the bedrooms and increased a little bit of the size of the laundry room. Based on the application as submitted, I believe received an email from staff that the opinion the application satisfies the applicable test under the Planning Act. And it's my opinion that the application for minor variance meets the 4 tests of the Act. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Coco. Are there any questions of the applicant at this time? Mr. Talowski, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You indicated that the requirement for the stone has added the square footage to the house. Is this because it's added to the thickness of the walls?
That is correct.
And could you explain how much of that is your 26 square meter variance, give or take? How much of that is the additional space you're adding versus what's being added because of the stonework? Yeah,
I think it took us over by 2.06, and I believe 2% of that was the stonework. The 0.6 was really the study area and the laundry. 2% of it was the stone area. And we did reach out to the architectural control, advising them of the same thing, and they said, yeah, go ahead and apply for a variance, but we need stone.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. If no one is called in for this application, we'll take the matter into committee.
There's no one at this time.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Mr. Talowski, go ahead.
Sure, Madam Chair, could I just ask staff, because I don't believe this stone issue is dealt with in the staff report, if staff could comment on that?
Certainly. Mr. McConnell.
Good evening, Madam Chairman.
Good evening.
Good evening. Through you to the member. I can't recall that being highlighted in the submission package, but I think the way staff did evaluate it was on the perspective of the RFA and how it would contribute to the overall size and scale and massing of the overall dwelling. In that it was staff's opinion that on that basis, it would be compatible with the area and would comply with the 4 tests under the act, and we were supportive of it on that basis.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I see none. Mr. Tlowski, do you want to move a motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I find this a difficult one in light of the comments I made on the previous application. However, I will note that the significance of the variances here, although a brand new subdivision, are not the same as previous, and you know, I will take the applicant at his word that the part of the variance is being caused by a request of the town, and I don't feel it would be appropriate to penalize the applicant for doing something that they've been requested to do, and clearly they have the support of staff. So with that, Madam Chair, and noting that there is no opposition, I will move that this application be approved, applied for, finding that it meets the tests of the Planning Act. And I would make that approval subject to conditions that the 2-story attached dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and drawings dated 11/10/2022 and elevations dated 11/10/2022. And that the approval expires within 2 years if building permit has not been issued.
Very well, Mr. Tlowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Okay, application CAV 183 of 2022 deferred from November the 15th of 2022 at 1230 Donley Crescent. Again, that's application CAV 183 of 2022 deferred from November the 15th. And it's at 1230 Donley Crescent.
I've moved Leon Wang into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Wang. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. To introduce myself to the Oakville Committee of Adjustment hearing, my name is Leon Wen, the architect from Unique House Inc., Unit 201, 80 Fulton Way, Richmond Hill. I am on behalf of my client, Ms. Susie Zhen, the owner at 1230 Donley Crescent. We are requesting the Committee of Adjustment to authorize a variance to permit the construction of a 2-story detached dwelling on the subject property, proposing 2 variances. Number 1, the maximum floor area for a private garage shall be 56 square meters. We are proposing 69.38 square meters. Number 2, the maximum residential floor area ratio shall be 29%. We are proposing 30.84%. So on this page, I have compared 3 houses in this community that the Committee of Adjustment have approved their variances during last few years. To make it easy to read, the variance for the maximum private garage area is marked in blue, and the variance for the maximum residential floor area is marked in green. So for the number one, the maximum garage area approved by the committee is 194.2 meters. For the property at 1243 Cleaver Drive, the first image at the bottom, our proposed maximum garage area is 69.38 square meters, which is much lower than this approved one. So for the next, the maximum residential floor area approved by the committee is 31.03% for the property at 1268 Downley Crescent, the third image at the bottom. Our proposed maximum residential floor area is 30.84%. This number is still within 31%. So we think the two variances are very minor and acceptable. Regarding the planning staff's comments for the massing and the scale, they think the open to below space at the front and rear of the dwelling would result in a perceived large floor area ratio, which we totally disagree. First of all, please look at the page number 2. The slides, the next slide. Yes, so in this page, those are the construction completed photos for our neighbor, 1243 Cleaver Drive, the neighbor across the street. It is a very well designed and constructed house, contemporary style with extremely high curtain wall glazing. It has a super large open to below space at the stair hallway and the living area. It also has a straight exterior wall at all the way from ground up to the roof with no recessed portion. It has 21.42 meters dwelling depth approved by the committee. And it also has a 3.57 meters interior side yard variance plus 1.11 meters side yard stair encroachment, all being approved by the committee. Comparing with this one, our proposed dwelling depth is only 14.2 meters with no any side yard setback variances. And it's a proposed open to below, looks much smaller than this. Secondly, if you look at the next page, next slides. This lot, is at the intersection between Downley Crescent and Cleaver Drive. If you look at the photos at the current lot, its elevation grade is much lower comparing with the neighbor due to the current grading condition. This for sure will result in a lower dwelling height, and plus we don't have any height variances. This lot is 30.8 meters wide by 38.9 meters deep. Very big lot, about 0.35 acres. The new dwelling has a front yard setback of 12.34 meters and the flank yard side yard setback of 5.45 meters, which means it is stepped back away from both Downley Crescent and Cleaver Drive. Its interior side yard setback is from 6.1 meters all the way to 10 meters, much further away from its neighbor, 1234 Downley Crescent. The envelope of this house is not a rectangular box. There are recessed parts on all exterior wall. Therefore, we strongly believe that this new dwelling would not result in a perceived large floor area ratio. Comparing with the approved neighbors' variances, ours are very minor and acceptable under Planning Act. So the last page. To sum up, we thank you all tonight to give us this opportunity to explore out those information. My client, Susie, has been living in Oakville for many years. She grew up here and recently graduated from the law school. She loved this community. We do believe this new transitional style home will bring more value to this neighborhood. We do appreciate your time. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wang. Are there any questions of Mr. Wang at this time? Mr. Talowski and then Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wang, could you address the staff report where it is suggesting that you've changed the variances, but you haven't changed the massing of the building, and that, which was the concern of staff. And by making the changes that you made with the garage, the open space, that the house massing is actually significantly larger than the number that's in the variance that's being requested.
Yes, I think after the first deferral, we did revise this design. Because if you look at the original site plan, our house is put further away from the front yard setback. Interior, because the planning staff is concerned about the massing, and I do have a recessed a little bit from if you look at the side yard, the elevations, we reduce the interior floor area a little bit. But because of the double ceiling height, we do think it's not when you see the house, it's not a big house when you see it from the street. Because our clients do appreciate the double ceiling height. Sometimes she's a pianist, she needs the double height. That's why we keep the open below area.
Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Pelosi and I are kind of thinking along the same lines, and but I do have an additional question I did want the agent for the owner to clarify the example that you provided with respect to Cleaver Drive.
Yes.
What were the variances that were applied for and received on that?
Okay, if you look at the first page for my material presentation, the first one, the left, the first one at the bottom.
Thank you.
The big box, the very simple, very contemporary style. They do have 5 variances. Garage area, residential floor area, interior side yard, dwelling depth, side yard stair encroachment.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any further questions or items of clarification? Okay, has anyone called in for that application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
If anybody would like to be moved into the meeting, they have to raise their hand, and then I can move them into the meeting so that they can speak.
Okay, very well. And we do have one email of opposition from Mr. Matthew Sambrook.
Okay, no one's raised their hand to be able to move into the meeting.
Okay, if no one has raised their hand, we'll take the matter into committee. Someone is speaking, but I'm not sure if they're speaking to this application. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, are you here for application CAV 183 of 2022 at 1230 Donley Crescent?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Can we have your name and address for the record? And is your camera on?
I can't see myself in the screen, so.
Where are they from? Oh, it's the other person. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought there was someone else in the meeting, but it's someone with Mr. Wang. Okay. If the person's going to
Are you the owner? Are you the owner?
Yeah, I'm the owner of Susie Zhang. Hi, everyone. Should
Okay.
I just talk in my architect screen or should I? It doesn't matter.
I thought your agent covered everything, but go ahead. What did you need to say?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members for being here and listening to our request. And I think my architect, Liang, who has given a great presentation to explain our reasons for the variances. And I hope that our request sounds reasonable. And some of the neighbors made similar minor variances in the neighborhood. So personally, the double height ceiling provides more brightening for visuals and it looks more spacious and elegant. So I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a piano player. So I love living in a bright space and there's a beautiful echo when I play the piano. And I often host small home concerts with my friends. So the vibes will be amazing under the double ceiling structure. And also our lot is located on lower elevation. So our adjacent neighbor's lot is on a higher slope. And there are some aged trees covering some sunlight in front of us. And even though our house is in the corner lot, but the east corner, the sign is covered by the opposite lot. And the other side is actually facing north, where the sunlight is even more limited. And actually the useful area is even smaller with a double ceiling area. And that's why we need to make the variances. So the structures are more proportional. And we also reduce a lot of areas from previous designs. And we have no height variances. We reversed our driveway according to the bylaw. And we're even on a lower level compared to our neighbors on the right side. And originally, we planned to build a U-shaped driveway, and because we're located on a corner lot, and we have to amend the driveway to the current position, which is 15 meters away from the corner. And the current position is our only option. And in this scenario, the two lovely trees have to be amended, and they're located in our yards, which is our neighbor's concern. And the two lovely trees are not very close to our neighbor's property. And our neighbors mentioned there's a privacy concern. And also I'm a landscape lover and planning to plant more trees and more greens for the landscaping. And indeed, privacy is also our concern. And we're planning to build fences on the boundary if that can satisfy both of myself and the neighbors. And I'm guaranteed that the privacy is not a problem. And I also emphasize this in my personal life. I also need a bigger garage because I drive electrical cars and we already have 4 vehicles for our family. And some of the cars, like the truck, are very wide. So we have a truck and I need to charge my electric car as well. That's why I'm demanding a bigger garage. So in the end, Oakville is an excellent, it has excellent environment and neighborhoods. And especially East Lake is even more outstanding. And we would like to build a masterpiece and I wish our building can be a icing on the cake in this community. And thank you all. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions of the owner? I see none.
There are some,
no one has called.
yeah, someone has raised their hand now. Can I move them into the meeting?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've moved Mr. Sambrook into the meeting.
Hi, Mr. Sandberg.
Hi, thank you for listening to me. I am the owner of 1234 Donnelly Crescent, Matthew Sandberg. Just want to say, first of all, acknowledge Susie and Leon's presentation, and I do appreciate particularly Susie's comments there around the privacy. That was one issue that we raised, particularly around the removal of some large trees on the lot, as well as the driveway. And I think those two items have been addressed. The point of clarification I want to make, though, is that when referring to actually the elevation of the lot, I think they keep on referring to the property across the street on Cleaver Drive, as opposed to the property adjacent, which is my property, which is actually lower than 1230. So that was a point of clarification I wanted to make on this call.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Sandbrook at this time? Okay, I see none. If there are no further comments, we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The applicant has spoken at length about minor adjustments to some of the exterior elements, including setbacks and placement of the building. But ultimately, the concern that's been articulated by staff and has been around the overall massing of the building. At the end of the day, the modifications that have been made to the building to date have not done anything to ameliorate the overall massing of this building. The inclusion of significant components of open to below space and significant oversize of the garage, are ultimately contributing to the mass of this building, which continues, in my viewpoint, to be out of character with the area and will result in impact upon adjacent properties, particularly given the terrain in the general area. On this basis, I'll be putting forward a motion to refuse the application as it does not conform to the four tests of the Act.
Okay, is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Tatowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just add that with all the significant variances being requested, there appears to have been no attempt to mitigate the impact of that increased size of the garage and the floor area, with resulting in still maintaining a house with full two-story walls that I don't believe is desirable or meets the intent here.
Very well, thank you for your comments. The recommendation is to deny the application. All those in support? Okay, all those opposed? Your application has been denied.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Okay, application CAV 163 of 2022 at 1374 Hickson Street. Again, that's application CAV 163 of 2022, deferred from October the 18th at 1374 Hickson Street. Do we have the agent Arlene Beaumont here?
Yes, I've just moved her into the meeting.
Very well.
Good evening again, Arlene Beaumont.
Good evening.
Associates. Our business address is 2140 Winston Park Drive, Suite 26, and that's in Oakville. We are here as the agents of the owner of 1374 Hickson Street. The application was deferred from October. We have reduced the coverage and reduced the garage area to address staff concerns. I have sent through a presentation, and because the evening is getting late, I'm going to be very brief. Could we skip to the third slide, please? Next, yeah, here we go. So the variance for lot coverage, we're asking for 27.29, whereas 25% is permitted. The house itself has a coverage of 23.88, and the additional coverage is related to a covered rear and a covered front porch. The larger porch is at the rear of the home. It's not visible from the street, and the porch at the front is quite small. We are not asking for a variance for residential floor area. Next slide, please. So this is a floor plan, and I've just highlighted the rear covered porch and then the much smaller front covered porch, which are basically putting us over on our coverage number. Next slide, please. So here's an elevation drawing. You can see the covered front porch is on the right-hand side. The rear porch is on the left hand. Next slide, please. For the garage area, we're asking for 62.39 square meters. So this is a double garage from the street. It would appear to be a double garage. There is a tandem space or a tandem area for storage. It is interior to the building. You can't see it from the street or from the neighbors. And the garage is a standard double car. The door is a standard double car garage door. And the variance for garage door width is not required. Next slide, please. So you can, I've just highlighted the garage area, and you can see that additional area at the back behind the double car portion of the garage. One thing I wanted to mention, staff have identified a variance that we missed, which was for the encroachment of the window wells. I've spoken with the owner, I've spoken with the architect. We will make those window wells comply with the bylaw. I did send through a revised basement plan and a revised elevation drawing on Monday, but it was too late to circulate to the committee. And I know staff said, well, if they approve the variances we've requested and they tie it to the plans, our plans don't reflect properly sized or window wells that comply with the bylaw. I think if we just were to add a sentence to the condition just saying that, you know, the window wells may be revised to comply with the bylaw for encroachment and width, that would sort of cover it off, but we will make those window wells comply. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very well. I would defer to planning with respect to that condition. If it would be better to make it to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, or how would you prefer that it is worded?
Madam Chair,
With respect. Sorry, I
Sorry.
didn't hear you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, if it were to the satisfaction of staff, but it's a relatively minor modification. So I think the general intent of the plans could still be adhered to, but sure, the wording is suggested by Ms. Beaumont to the satisfaction of the director would be more than adequate.
Okay, very well, thank you. Any further questions of Ms. Beaumont at this time, or items of clarification? I see none. There has not been any calls with respect to this property.
There's been none at this time.
Very well, then we'll take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I'll note that there's no community opposition. Also, just like to point out that there is no floor area variance being requested here, that the garage area variance that is being requested is not contributing to the coverage variance, that the coverage variance is related to the porches, which in my opinion actually help to articulate the design. With that, Madam Chair, so I'll move approval of this application, subject to 2 conditions: that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with site plans and elevation drawings to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and that the approval expires in 2 years if the building permit is not issued.
Very well, is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Application CAV 144 of 2022 at 1362 Devon Road. Again, it's application CAV 144 of 2022 at 1362 Devon Road.
Okay, I've moved the agent into the meeting.
Hi, sorry, just turning on my camera. How are you? Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members, and municipal staff. My name is Johnny Regina. I'm the applicant for this, I'm the applicant and agent for this particular property. What you see in front of you is a revision to an original submission that was made back in September, heard in front of this committee that was deferred. Our application has been revised based on conversations we had with the municipal planner and discussions on how to mediate the designs to be more acceptable. What you see in front of you in terms of the staff report shows that we've met the requirements they requested of us. There's no objections on the 3 items that have been identified in front of you or before you. We feel that this meets the 4 tests based on revisions that we've submitted and the write-ups based on the planner on the support of what we've done and articulates. So we ask that this application be approved based on the 3 conditions, no objections from the planning staff. And there's no letters of opposition as well.
Thank you, Mr. Regina. Are there any questions or items of clarification of the agent at this time? Okay, I see none. There's been no calls or interest in speaking to this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There's no one at this time.
Very well, then we'll take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the presentation of the agent, I am satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. Accordingly, I will put forward a motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated November 3rd, 2022, and elevation drawings dated December 8th, 2022, and that the approval will expire from within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter to make deputations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay. We have a confirmation of minutes for January the 25th of 2023. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. And then at this time, we'll do a motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle. We are adjourned at 8:58.